Oh, also critical support for our brave ally, Bad Empanada. Apparently he is going unhinged on Hasan right now on Twitter. Hasan recently had his worst interview in a while with propagandist and foreign policy advisor Matt Duss. It wasn't productive. Hasan and Matt couldn't agree on anything, and you could tell that he was talking from both sides of his mouth. People wonder why Bernie Sanders has such a bad position on the genocide in Gaza. People like Matt Duss are a big part why. I was astounded with Hasan being charitable to this charlatan on stream. Like, what was the point of it? I had to turn off the stream when the dude started trying to make an argument for why some Zionists are good people, actually. What the f? Turns out this guy is even more insane than I thought. Jesus Christ. Hasan Matt Duss. An hour and 40 minutes. What the fuck?
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, son?
What's going on, Matt? Pleasure to have you on the broadcast. Welcome to the Hasan Abi broadcast. Here it is, everybody. Ladies and gentlemen, Matt Duss. As I said earlier, a second ago, Matt Duss is the former foreign policy advisor to Bernie Sanders and now currently working at the Center for International Policy. Matt, someone called you evil yesterday, for the record. That's how I presented you. And it reminded me that I was meaning to have you on the broadcast to talk about both the Donald Trump, Vladimir Putin summit that is supposed to be taking place tomorrow, but then also talk to you about Democrats, their failures on Israel-Palestine, your opinion and your evolved opinion on Israel-Palestine personally, and you know what happened, like how that. I agree with you. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because like what Rashid Tlaib told me was basically that like politicians are still malleable, and it does seem like this unshakable force, like the loyalty and defense of Israel is just like impossible to break through. But it's very clear that at least from her feedback, that they do see people at their town halls and they do get scared. And I think Gallego was a great example of this, like a person who has been pro-Israel in his town hall when faced with that question had to be like, oh well, maybe I would have voted against weapons. There's also the other side of this where people talk about like the distinction between defensive weapons and offensive weapons. I wanted to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. Well, first, in regard to what Congresswoman Tlaib said, I mean, she's right. It is so important for members to kind of hear from constituents and to get grief and to get complaints. I mean, that's what I was saying earlier, that for the longest time, they've only ever felt like they had to fear pressure from their right. They've only been looking over their right shoulder when this question comes up. And it's because of a lot of work by a lot of people, activists and others who, that they understand, like they need to check their left shoulder as well. And that Politico article that you quoted from, where Pete went to kind of clean up the mess. I mean, it's saying, this is going to be a litmus test going into 2028. And I think we saw from Mamdani's campaign something really important. There's a good reason why it's a litmus test, because it signals to people that you're not full of crap on a whole range of other issues. You can offer, a really fantastic platform, a whole set of great ideas. But if your answer to a question about Gaza is that Israel has the right to defend itself, you're basically telling people that I'm full of crap and I'll probably fold on all that other great stuff too. So it really...
These are the people that his audience hates? Okay.
It's a litmus test, I think, for a couple of really good reasons. So what was the second part of your question there?
The second part of my question was the distinction being made in some circles, at least, like between offensive and defensive weapons. Do you feel like this is a distinction without a difference?
I mean, I understand just you don't want to be. I mean, it's important to allow countries to defend themselves, to defend their civilians.
Wait, which one's mine? Not good. Yikes. Allowing Israel to defend civilian population? Cringe.
We talk about that a lot with regard to Israel. It's a fair question. I think it's a very important question. Why do we never ask that of the Palestinians? Israel has a right to defend itself. Do the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves?
I say yes.
I think, yeah, absolutely. I think they absolutely do.
So brave, Hasan. Good job.
I mean, they not only have a right to defend themselves, they have a right to resist occupation, as any people do.
No, it's both legal and moral, for sure.
They not only have a right to defend themselves, they have a right to resist occupation, as any people do.
No, it's both legal and moral, for sure.
That's right. They should do so within the bounds of international law with the treatment of civilians and non-combatants, just as Israel should. But anyone should be able to answer unequivocally yes, that the Palestinians have a right to defend themselves. Now, going to this question of defensive versus offensive, I understand that Congresswoman, AOC got some grief for her vote and then for her explanation. And I understand people's concerns about that.
I like that guy in chat just said, the difference is Israel does not have the right.
AOC got some grief for her vote and then for her explanation.
The difference is Israel does not have the right. All of them should die. Where's Jank?
And I understand people's concerns about that. My kind of question here is like, was it worth spending that much bandwidth on this amendment that was not going to pass at all? I don't think so. She ended up voting against the entire bill anyway. That was the right vote. And I think where people should focus.
Well, see, I agree with you. And I think
Really?
the concern that I have isn't like, oh, AOCIA or whatever the people say all the time in online circles. The concern I have is, and I think you'll agree with me on this, that there is a void in discourse right now with the way that the Democratic base feels. It's a 92-8 issue at this stage, right? And that void is being experienced in every facets of American politics. Like there's independents are overwhelmingly seeing Israel in a disfavorable way. Even Republicans, by majority, regardless of their loyalty to Donald Trump, have had issues with Israel in ways that we've never seen in American politics before. So when the overwhelming public sentiment is, as I like to jokingly say, Israel o'clock, and the Democrats are completely unable to ride that wave, even on a partisan, even with a cynical, cold, calculated partisan analysis, I fear that that void will be taken over by grifters and maybe even anti-Semitic people, and the Democrats are actually dropping the ball both politically and also on the policy front on this issue once again. I think AOC should be the person that is pushing for amendments like that. Do you disagree?
I don't know.
That's really good. No, I think that's actually a good idea. I think that AOC should nuke her entire political career on your one pet issue that the people pushing the hardest on don't even give a fuck about voting democratically for. Like, good one, Hasan, retard. Maybe if you guys actually fucking voted, maybe they'd give a fuck about what any of you have to say.
No, that amendment is the one to fight on. I think there are a lot of great things that she's pushed, and she will, moving into the NDAA, this big defense authorization bill. I'm really interested to see what she's going to be offering there. I don't know if that one bill that Marjorie Taylor Greene offered was really the kind of hill to fight on. I understand.
What? F off. Bruh. Then why vote against it?
Concerned about it. I think there are smarter places to fight. Greene offered was really the kind of hill to fight on. I understand what people have concern about it. I think there are
It's not a perfect amendment.
Smarter places to fight. But I would also say, people should understand, and I think most people do, that she's been one of the great champs on this. And I think it's fair to have disagreement.
Ooh. I like how Hasan is such a pussy bitch. He won't push back on anything this fucking guy says because what? The guy's more informed than him? Well, that's anybody that knows anything about this issue. Is Hasan just here to ask softball questions because he's too stupid or too scared to push back against him?
And to question some of the choices she makes, but I also think it's important to keep.
That's why Debs keep losing, someone said. No, AOC should put that amendment, not MTG. Oh, no? Oh, not that amendment, Matt? Then which one? That party is dead. Here's the evidence.
In mind. I mean, she has done enormous work.
Oh, for sure. She called it a genocide way before many people did.
Right.
And that should be recognized, and I definitely do recognize that, which is why I always think, like, it's inconsistent.
Palestine is the hill to die on, I guess.
Even in the simplest terms, if you're like saying that this country is committing a genocide, but then you're also saying like, but we have to keep giving it weapons to allow itself to continue behaving this belligerent way. Because that's my main point on this, is that like everyone, including Israeli society and Israeli officials, knows that without America's unlimited support in Israel's offensive capabilities and its defensive capabilities since October 7, 70% of all munitions that Israel has used has come from the United States of America, both on the defensive side and on the offensive side. We've moved our Navy around Israel's enemies and around Israel's allies as well in an effort to defend Israel whenever there's retaliation from countries or militancy groups that have the capacity to resist against Israel or to fight back. And in that process, like, I think we're giving Israel...
Is it true that Israel needs the U.S. or not? No, they don't. It's definitely helpful. But like absent the U.S., I'm sure they would try to find either some other support or they would just become far more aggressive against the Palestinians.
Bandwidth to continue behaving in this belligerent way. And defensive weapons, I think, play a formative role in this.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, and also, I get that, money is fungible, and money they are getting for, quote unquote defensive weapons is money that they don't have to, that they can then spend on offensive weapons. So, I get those arguments. Yeah. I guess what I would say is that it's fine to disagree with the vote and disagree with her explanation, but I also think in terms of, where we're focusing our energy and where activists are focusing their energy, it's rather than going after her, it's like, I want more people to be voting against the offensive weapons,
Yeah. No, and the other thing that I also am finding myself consistently trying to get politicians on the Democratic side to like advocate for is that if they lead on this issue and even are unafraid to take bold and, dare I say, radical, I guess, stances on issues like this, they will immediately move the over.
Wait, does somebody give Hasan questions to ask? Am I crazy?
To like advocate for is that if they lead,
or does he just look in that direction when he talks? Maybe maybe the guy's camera is here, and so he looks at the camera sometimes. I do that sometimes, and then I'll look back at my camera. Maybe
on this,
or no, because he's not even looking at his camera now. He's looking
issue, and even are unafraid to take bold and dare I say, radical, I guess, stances on issues like this, they will immediately move the Overton window in a more positive direction.
Like he looks back to
what I mean by this is, if
like why does he do that?
congressional leaders that are the most progressive right now were running around talking about no more weapons to Israel at all, and maybe even a sanctions package to Israel, if that was the advocacy that you heard from the Bernie Sanders and the AOCs of the world, and like bold and progressive policymakers, then I think more moderate parts of the Democratic Party would inevitably try to find a centrist position and retriangulate their perspective, instead of just like continuing to say like, oh, well, we don't know if we can stop giving weapons to Israel. That's just the way I
Good one.
see it. I think that that's part of the reason why the Republicans have dominated discourse on every issue, both domestic and foreign policy, in perpetuity, because they're unafraid to be radical.
Well, I mean, don't get me. I'm with you on that. I mean, we need kind of bolder, more courageous leadership on a whole range of issues. So I agree there. But I'll say just on this one issue, I mean, even that Politico article, the fact that Pete was even asked about banning arms sales is because of Bernie's resolutions. These joint resolutions of disapproval that Bernie introduced and it was voted on a few weeks ago. It got the most votes from any from Democrats ever. I think it was 27 for one, 24 for another. Both of them more than half of the Democratic caucus in the Senate. Still too few, in my view. I mean, this should have, when you look at the reality of the genocide and what's being done with our weapons, I mean, we should have stopped these arms sales a long, long time ago. But still, recognizing the weird way that this issue works, I think it is important to chalk that up as an important achievement. But also, one of the achievements was getting potential candidates for 2028 to have to answer, what would you have done? Senator Alyssa Slotkin, who managed not to be there for the vote, she had to answer the question, would you have voted for it? Gallego, also not there, had to answer the question. This is going to keep coming up. It's going to be a question that's going to be asked to every candidate who wants to run in the 2028 primary, and that's important.
Yeah. This was not only a litmus. This is not only a litmus test for upcoming elections, but I think this was a litmus test in many ways for the previous election as well. And I wanted to hear your perspective on this, because a lot of people, I think, falsely claim that the left was a single issue on this, right? And that the left was responsible for the defeat of Kamala Harris, which, of course, if you actually look at the numbers, like Jill Stein and all the other, third-party spoilers that are supposed to be on the left flank, did not actually make up for the margin of defeat anyway. So it's objectively false to make this claim. But I think that a lot of people, including those who I talked to, including the Paw Johns that I talked to before the election in the lead up when I was like ringing the alarm bells about this issue, actively avoided it. And I think it was actually deliberately cut out of their autopsy on why the campaign failed as well, like this issue in particular, because people's attitudes about what's going on in Gaza and about what Israel is doing did not dramatically swing overnight. There were numerous polls that...
I like this. He likes to collect from like both worlds of like, well, no, obviously the left didn't cost him the election. Just look at who voted for Jill Stein, right? There weren't enough third-party spoilers, so that can't be the case. But also they didn't talk about it, and they should have talked about it, because it actually is the reason why they lost. And I was ringing the alarm bells on this, and nobody paid attention. And it is actually the reason why. It's like, also, you don't have to measure the impact just in how many people voted for the third party. It could be how many people just didn't vote at all. It could be how many people could have been persuaded to vote with different messaging, right? Not just like in the absence of this, but in the absence of this, what else could we have talked about instead?
Showed that denying weapons to Israel and forcibly implementing a ceasefire would have been a very important issue that Kamala Harris could deviate away from the Biden regime on, and yet she failed to do so. So what is your assessment on this?
Yeah, and I'll just say there's been polling. I remember this one poll that came out in 2019 by the Center for American Progress, where I used to work years and years ago. But I say that because the Center for American Progress is a very closely party-aligned think tank, and they put out a poll that showed a majority of Democrats in for American Progress is a very supported think tank, and they put out a poll that showed a majority of Democrats in 2019 supported blocking aid, conditioning aid. So this has been a majority position among Democratic voters for.
I get so tired when fucking people talk about polls. Blocking aid or conditioning aid, those are two completely different things. Why would you even group them together? Those are two totally wildly different things. Like almost all aid, that's almost like a truism. Almost all aid should be conditioned to some extent, right? Like what a worthless grouping of those two things, but whatever.
For more than 2 election cycles now, it's now a supermajority that supports this, and for very understandable reasons. Now I don't know that I know that the Pod Save guys have actually covered Gaza and Palestine quite a bit. I do want to recognize that. And going back to 2019, it was actually they hosted a series of talks at the J Street conference where Bernie came out and declared conditioning aid. Warren came out. Buttigieg came out and declared support for it for like 2 weeks until he got some pushback, and so that's when he kind of moved off it. Going to Harris. what I'll say is this: like I said about why it's a litmus test. I think it's impossible to say the actual down to the decimal point what impact Gaza made on her loss. I think there is no question that it played a role, not just among voters for whom that is a priority issue. And to people who criticize the left for being one issue on Gaza, I'm like, being one issue on a genocide, I think that's a fairly decent thing to be one issue about. The fact that your government is supporting a genocide in front of our eyes. But it was also
said it best. He said, "A party that is unwilling to stop a genocide. What makes you think they are willing to defend democracy?"
Right.
Who said that? What?
A party that is unwilling
a genocide in front of our eyes. But it was also
said it best. He said, "A party that is unwilling
a genocide in front of our eyes."
Who?
But it was also said it best. He said, "A party that is unwilling to stop a genocide. What makes you think they are willing to defend democracy?"
Right. That's exactly right, and that's also kind of what I was getting at. Is that even for people for whom Gaza and the issue of Palestinian rights is not a real priority, the fact that she couldn't give the bare minimum, that she couldn't depart from these pre-baked nonsense talking points about how too many Palestinians have died and we're all so sad to watch this happening day after day after day, as if we weren't completely complicit in this happening, just signaled that she wasn't for real. People are looking to be, they want to believe people, and she was not believable on this. And I think that, that signaled that she's probably not for real on a whole bunch of other things too.
Yeah. No, it was a perfect issue to show the problems that was emblematic within the entire Democratic Party's inability to listen to the demands being made by their base, their own base, that they were so willing to throw them aside to say, we're not going to do anything on this. We're just going to stay the course and just feed a bunch of bullshit about how they're trying desperately to get a ceasefire deal done, when in fact everyone who was even a little bit aware of what was going on would either get mad because they're like, what do you mean we can't get a ceasefire done? We're America, okay? Or or they just thought, okay, well, you're feckless, you're unable to do this, you're weak. Or of course they knew the truth, which was this is bullshit, which is what I want to ask you about, because I have tweeted a lot of things. I've said a lot of things about Israel and all of the militant resistance against Israel that oftentimes Zionists get very mad about. People that are doing Hasbara, people that are pro-Israel get very mad about. One of those is the notion that this conflict could end, this genocide could end at any given point with one phone call. And I wanted to hear, what your perspective is, you're a foreign policy guy, and if you think that, well, this is of course an exaggerated claim, it's not literally one phone call, but it's as close to one phone call as you can get in American politics. And it has ended with one phone call in the past, with George H.W. Bush, with the continuation of the settlement projects, with Ronald Reagan, with Lebanon, and also with Joe Biden in 2021, with Israel's siege on Gaza in 2021. So what's your assessment on that?
Yeah, as you said, not one phone call, not one day, but as Joe Biden did in May 2021, he calls up Netanyahu and says, we're out of runway here. We got to wrap this thing up. He never did that.
Yeah.
Here. And granted, the mood of Israel, the reaction to October 7th, this was a different situation, but still, after months and months and months of this, and knowing for a fact, and let's be clear, they knew for a fact what Israel was doing. They had complete visibility onto Israel's policy, its strategy, its tactics. And this is something I bring up a lot because I think it's important to note. The Biden administration assessed publicly that Russia was committing war crimes in Ukraine within a month of the February 2022 invasion. They could not, by the end of the Biden administration, after whatever it was, 18 months, they still could not come out with an assessment of Israel's behavior in Gaza. That's just such bullshit. We have such absolute visibility, far greater visibility into Gaza, into Israel's tactics and what it's doing than we do into what Russia's doing. And the fact that they couldn't make an assessment, which everyone can see on their phones, literally everyone, Palestinians are reporting it.
USAID itself actually floated a report all the way up to Anthony Blinken, and he spiked it on purpose because he wanted to continue unlimited weapons to Israel.
Jesus.
No, and the point you're making there, this is, as bad as materially supporting the war was and is. In my view, just as bad was the propaganda campaign that the Biden administration waged on its behalf. This was a campaign of lies and disinformation that I think it was as bad as the lead up to the Iraq War.
Also, I don't know if this guy believes it, but keep in mind, Hasan still believes that Al-Alil hospital or whatever, he still thinks that was bombed by Israel and that 600 people died a week or two into the war or whatever. He still believes in every single fake story that came out. He believes in all of those still, even the ones that have been like this. Hasan still believes in all of those.
And I use that. I'm very careful about saying that. But when you look at what we constantly heard from White House spokesman John Kirby, from people at the State Department, we're not seeing evidence of these war crimes. We haven't finished our assessment. It was just such bullshit. And it played a really corrosive role, and was designed to play a role in suppressing Democratic pushback. And it helped lay the groundwork for the continuing denial of this genocide that we're seeing now. And this is again why, as critical as I was of the Biden administration and people inside for doing what they did, I am even more critical of them now for staying silent about it.
Yeah.
They're not in government anymore. You saw the intelligence.
Kamala Harris, in this political article we were looking at earlier, chose not to give an answer, and it's been 8 months.
This guy is not too radical. This guy is too much of a pro-Zio cuck for Hasan's audience, such that Bad Empanada has now turned on him and his whole subreddit is attacking him. Is it for this section?
On that front, I guess like because I wanted to see like you're a foreign policy guy. This is what you do. I wanted to see like what are some of the disagreements that we might have. And one I think is on the issue of Zionism in general, because as I said, I see Zionism as an ethno-supremacist ideology that is built around the extermination of the indigenous population that happens to be non-Jewish, like the in-group, out-group dynamic.
What does he think indigenous means? Just to be clear, there's a reason why Arabs got across the entirety of the greater Middle East region. It wasn't because they were indigenous. That's just fucking retarded. I don't know if he's being retarded or evil there when he says that. Now, for some reason, when brown people do conquest, it doesn't count as conquest. I guess only white people can do conquest. But like, what a retarded fucking thing to say.
And so and therefore I see it as inherently fascist. And I feel like this is something that a lot of people.
I don't know if exterminating indigenous populations has anything to do with fascism either, but okay.
Refuse to reckon with. And I wonder if you have disagreements with this.
I mean, I would disagree with defining all of Zionism that way. I think the actual material reality, like Zionism as it exists in the world, unfortunately, I think reflects that. And people who are Zionists, I think, need to contend with that. But I think there are other forms of Zionism. I mean, there was a pretty serious debate going in the late 1800s into the early part of the 20th century. People who classified themselves as identified as Zionists, but there were questions over: do we need our own state? Can we form a community within an existing state? There were all kinds of questions about, okay, how do we relate to the indigenous population?
Let me. Oh my god, dude, their chat. Do you think I wonder if the next shooter is going to come from Hasan's chat here. These guys are ready to fucking go to town, bro.
Is it a Jewish ethno-state? What does self-determination for Jews really require? And so that's how I would tend to define Zionism broadly. It's just the belief that the Jews are a people, and as a people have a right to self-determination. Now others define a right.
Sorry, you're not allowed to have a right to self-determination. You're not brown or an enemy of the United States. Those are the only people that matter.
To self-determination in their historic homeland of Israel in the Middle East. A right to a Jewish ethno-state. People add all kinds of different details on that. But in understanding it in its broadest terms, I understand it as I said. I mean, I know I have really close friends who identify themselves as progressive Zionists, who would share a lot of our criticisms, and who live there and do this work under considerable pressure and trying to create a society that is equal, in which Jews and Palestinians are equal under the law. Some of them support two states, some of them support one state, some of them support one kind of confederal arrangement. But I do think there are people who identify strongly as Zionists. To whom your description of kind of a violent ethno-eliminationist chauvinism doesn't really apply.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, if the impact and the ultimate reality that is unfolding is genocide in Gaza and pogroms in the West Bank, with a deliberate attempt to inevitably implement the greater Israeli state project, which Benjamin Netanyahu has even pontificated on as recently as this past week. Then the way I see it is just like the old understanding of Zionism, and I always go back to Albert Einstein on this.
Oh my God!
He was, I guess, such a Zionist initially that he was slated to be the president of Israel, the first president of Israel, and his attitude on this was that
Is that true? I've never heard that before. Like seriously, or like
the brigades, the initial the early.
Sorry. American Friends of the Fighters for the Freedom of Israel. Dear Sir, when a real and final catastrophe should befall us in Palestine, the first responsible for it would be the British, and the second responsible for it, the terrorist organizations built up from our own ranks. I'm not willing to see anybody associated with those misled and criminal people. Sincerely yours, Albert Einstein. The final downfall of Israel was predicted by Einstein. What year was this published? Because that's pretty fucking important. I'm gonna guess that this was published in like anywhere from what, 39 to 45, or not published but written. Does anybody have any idea when this? Hold on. Because he's saying in Palestine. How could he have predicted the downfall of Israel when it wasn't? I don't even think it was a country yet. No. Oh, he did it right before the war, April 10th, 1948. Okay. What do they think this letter is proving? So the criticism here is, for one, the Brits basically completely abandoned the region because they clusterfucked everything there, and then they refused to take any responsibility or strong stances on it. So the British kind of fucked up, and then the terrorist organizations. When you're talking about the paramilitary groups, your goons and your Lehis or whatever, these were super small paramilitary groups compared to the larger fighting force that existed at the time. But obviously, nobody liked those two smaller forces. There's a reason why they all got subsumed, and a lot of the people got in big trouble. The Haganah was the largest fighting force, and then it all became the IDF. But I don't know what he thinks this is saying here.
This is just like the old understanding of Zionism. And I always go back to Albert Einstein on this, which, he was, I guess, such a Zionist initially that he was slated to be the president of Israel, the first president of Israel. And his attitude on this was that the brigades, the initial, the early Zionist brigades that turned into the Israeli Defense Force after the development of the nation state, when he saw the atrocities that were unfolding, when he caught wind of this, he wrote letters decrying that Irgun, Lehi, and even the Haganah, these militia movements were behaving exactly like the Nazis were.
The Haganah, I seriously doubt it, and I would be shocked if he used the phrase exactly like the Nazis. Okay, I doubt that's true. I would have to read more on Einstein, but that's not what that letter looked like. That he would condemn literally every single part of You're saying that Albert Einstein, after the Holocaust, was opposed completely to the formation of any Israeli state whatsoever? I don't know. I don't know.
And I feel like someone who has that attitude that early on in the initial formation of the Israeli nation state, which came with the Nakba, an ethnic displacement campaign that was crafted with the deliberate interest of ethnically displacing 750,000 Palestinians from their villages, implies that, especially when you factor in Theodore Herzl or even Jabotinsky's assessments or David Ben-Gurion's statements about the indigenous population and what must be done with them, it comes across as though it's been marketing. It's been.
The initial thing was to just live alongside them, and then once it was realized that you couldn't do this, then people's opinions started to change after the massacres, and then after the fighting back and forth, and then
marketed as something different. And I think that social conditioning has played a major role in this, especially in the West, for American Jews as well as, of course, the evangelical Zionists, the evangelical Christian Zionists. But ultimately, if it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, then it's probably not a chicken. We might be looking at a duck.
No, I mean, everything you said there is fair. I would also add, someone who might identify as a communist can defy communism in very basic terms, but if they're being honest about their ideology, they do need to contend with the reality of.
Oh, now I see why they don't like this guy.
Governments that identified as communists, like the Soviets, like the Chinese Communist Party, and some of the things that were carried out in communism's name. That doesn't mean that
this dude is a Nazi. Wait, did I see that? Is that what that comment said? Oh, that duck is a Nazi. Never mind, my bad.
name. That doesn't mean that defines communism.
Don't even. Oh, brother LeMayo.
For all time. But if they're going to be honest about what their ideology means, they do have to grapple with actually existing communism. You can find other examples too.
I agree with you. I think that it's very important to learn from the past.
Find other examples.
Did Hasan say I wouldn't?
I agree with you. I think that it's very important to learn from the past mistakes of.
When was the last confrontational debate, interview, whatever Hasan had? Notice how Hasan always yes and even when the guy is disagreeing with shit that Hasan would say, or even when Hasan would have a substantive disagreement, he always just says yes and yes and yes. And people do this to me sometimes in debates, and it drives me crazy. Where someone's like, "Yeah, I agree with you," and it's like, "Wait. If you agree with anything I just said, first of all, no, you don't. And secondly, if you do, then how can you still have this conclusion?" I hate it when people do this yes and. Podcast bros are notorious for this shit.
Attempts towards developing communism, like the transitional socialist states, whether it be like USSR or existing transitional socialist states like the current formation in China, there are always going to be issues. There's always going to be mistakes, and some of them are going to be incredibly costly. Widespread famine is obviously a great example of this in terms of some of the major issues that existed. And I think people need to contend with that, certainly. But I just think ideologically, when we go back to first principles, the fundamentals of an ideology, not only just the opinions of its initial movement leaders, but also in its implementation, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not an accident that we have arrived at the current genocide that's going on, which many people are now recognizing as a genocide. It was an inevitability. And I would go so far as to say that we're experiencing something of the sort in America as well. This is something that I saw in Israel in I think it was the 2018 Supreme Court protests that were taking place, where you had liberal Zionists and progressive Zionists that were out in the streets and protesting against the Israeli state, and the Israeli state was using some of the mechanisms of enforcement that they routinely apply to the Palestinians on their own their own Jewish citizens. And one thing that I saw in those protests was everyone was waving the Israeli flag, and one thing that they never wanted to contend with was the existing apartheid mechanisms, the violence of that enforcement, the notion that the IDF is actually a secular force for good. They could not contend with how this country was becoming even more right wing. And we have something similar here in America as well. Like,
remember when these pro-pallies talk, when they talk about why Israel is becoming more right-wing, it's just because Jews are evil. That's the only thing you can possibly believe, because they never actually talk about any of the violence from the other side. It's literally just about how just how Jews are evil. Like, I don't know why they never talk about. Well, I do know. I know.
Like, we leave a lot of these contradictions unaddressed, whether it be white supremacy, whether it be America's settler colonial history and this nation's founding. And I think if left unaddressed, it is inevitable.
America's settler colonial history and this nation's founding. Excuse me. This was Britain's settler colonialism. If you want to blame settler colonialism, then fucking blame Britain. That was not the United States, okay? It wasn't the Eisenhower, what was it, the Balfour Declaration? It wasn't the Eisenhower Declaration, or it wasn't the fucking whoever, like, what? This is Britain. Fuck you. How do we, like, and also, I would obviously object to calling it settler colonialism here, but somehow it's not when it was all the Arabs, I guess, but...
That we will have a leader like Donald Trump. And if left unaddressed, it is inevitable that Israel will have Benjamin Netanyahu as the leadership again, and his coalition will become increasingly more reactionary and increasingly more violent. That's just the way I see it. And I think that's an extension of the ideology of Zionism, and it can masquerade as like trying to find a homeland for people that have withstood tremendous amounts of oppression, historic pogroms, the Holocaust, unimaginable pain for thousands of years. But in the way that it has unfolded, it has been an incredibly violent endeavor to the indigenous population that didn't do anything to these people, that came in as a part of initially a British settler colonial operation.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, I get
that's okay.
We'll just, I look at the history of the state of Israel, even before the founding of the state, some decisions that were made by the various waves of Zionist immigration, and decisions that were made by, foreign powers like the United States and others. And I think I can identify possibly some.
What were the decisions made by the United States pre-48? Can we talk? Are they going to talk about this? I'm very curious.
Some pivot points where things might have developed in another way. So I don't know if I'm going to agree totally that this was all pre-baked and predetermined from the beginning. But clearly there has been a tendency, a kind of variation of Zionism that has taken control and been in control for some decades now, that is clearly violent, that is clearly exclusivist, and is clearly eliminationist, as we're seeing in front of us. And again, I do think the U.S. bears some responsibility here, because the United States, more than any other country, has been the one that has kind of shielded Israel from any real consequences from decades and decades of these abuses. And I don't know if irony is the right word, but no country has done more to help really diminish and strangle the Israeli peace movement and the possibility of the emergence of a more pluralistic and equal vision of the Zionist state of Israel than the United States, by shielding it from those consequences and shielded Israel from any real, because the United States, more than any other country, has been decades now that is clearly violent, that is clearly exclusivist, and is clearly eliminationist, as we're seeing in front of us. And again, I do think the U.S. bears some responsibility here, because the United States, more than any other country, has been the one that has kind of shielded Israel from any real consequences from decades and decades of these abuses. And I don't know if irony is the right word, but no country has done more to help really diminish and strangle the Israeli peace movement and the possibility of the emergence of a more pluralistic and equal vision of the Zionist state of Israel than the United States, by shielding it from those consequences. And people.
The U.S. didn't super hardcore back Israel until really like 73. Like before then, Israel had relationships with other European countries, kind of, and then smuggled shit in and kind of did shit on their own. The idea that like the U.S. was here since the founding and helped them through all of their early wars, whatever, it's just not true. But
like Joe Biden, who says there should be no daylight between the U.S. and Israel, that kind of approach has been wind at the back of the settler movement. That has been wind at the back of the extremists who are now perpetrating this genocide.
Yeah. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and let's.
Oh, he doesn't even fight that hard on it. Oh no, his audience. Is Ukraine just an American/NATO proxy? Jesus.
Speaking of Obama, so I'm once again going to go back to Mersheimer on this issue as well. He's Mr. Realpolitik. He's a big China hawk. Obviously, I have many disagreements with him on that front. But in terms of his analysis on the relationship between the United States of America and Russia, especially as it pertains to Ukraine, I think when he identifies Ukraine as a proxy, a Western proxy, but specifically a proxy for American interests, I happen to agree with him on this. Like the interventions that have happened in Ukraine in terms of like civil society organizations and things like that is a mechanism of the American State Department And this level of involvement starts with this like holistic, let's make Ukraine more progressive, or let's make this insert whatever country you want to more progressive. But then it's like it turns into a way to utilize and maybe even kind of rip apart the sovereignty or whatever sovereignty that these countries might have, not just Ukraine, but every other country, at the behest of America's foreign policy interests, which would be to undermine Russia's attempts of violating Ukrainian sovereignty and bringing Ukraine into its sphere of influence. Would you disagree with that assessment?
I would disagree that, with treating Ukraine as just a proxy for the United States or for NATO. I think the Ukrainians themselves have wanted to get independence from Russia. I mean, this is a longstanding, again, just speaking as a Ukrainian myself, this is something I was raised with as well. I mean, when Russians refer to Ukrainians as other brothers, every Ukrainian knows what that actually means. It's not a compliment. But there has been many efforts going back even before the Soviet Union to achieve Ukrainian independence, with the understanding that there are going to be strong relations between Russia and Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainians are Russian speakers first. I mean, there's obviously family relationships. There's culturally a lot that's shared, but the stuff that USAID is doing, like supporting democracy efforts, supporting civil society efforts. I mean, yes, there's an element of that where the United States obviously is looking to achieve its interests. He wants to bring countries closer to it and farther away from its adversaries. I would not just interpret that as all of this was kind of like this coherent effort just to kind of weaken Russia. I think the Ukrainians themselves have and had and still have a strong desire to set up an independent, sovereign democracy. And again, that's why I've been supportive of efforts to help them defend themselves. I mean, I want this war to end. The Ukrainians want this war to end more than anyone. But I think referring to Ukraine as a proxy for the United States, really denies the Ukrainians agency in a way that I just don't think is right.
I don't disagree with you on this, by the way.
Oh, yes, yeah. His chat is actually insane. What the fuck? Yeah, his chat is crazy. I feel like if the next shooter comes from his fucking chat, I think that, not to pull a big Dan here, but I feel like Dan Clancy and Twitch, like some of these people should be charged with crimes. It is insane that it's just like a fucking terrorist recruiting platform on Twitch now for this guy's chat. It's actually wild.
The way, of course, I think your assessment is completely correct. I see it as a converging interests. Ukrainians have always, in their national history, and you know this a lot better than I do, given your personal background, have always have always made their national project to be outside of the sphere of Russian influence, outside of to have complete sovereignty. So that part I understand, and maybe along the way historically there have been some not so great attempts to do so.
Yep. Yeah. He's doing the Ukrainians were Nazis, by the way. In case you didn't know, Ukrainians were Nazis. Okay, just so you know. Just letting you know that, okay?
By some Ukrainians, while
for the Bandera shit, yeah.
The overwhelming majority of Ukrainians were busy, liberating the concentration camps. So, and it happens. I mean, the IRA also, an institution that I'm wholeheartedly in favor of, may or may not have, in the same time frame, thought that they could have allegiances with someone who is an enemy to the British Empire. I won't say who, but both the Ukrainian groups and the IRA had found themselves in the throes of a dark allegiance, let's say.
I don't know historically where this comes from or how, but the bomber terrorist fucking people from Ireland, they're like supportive of every crazy thing around the world, and so people like to latch on to that shit. I don't know why or when this started, but yeah, the IRA is like they're part of like the pro-Pally people and the kind of a little bit fuck Ukraine people, but I don't know why or how that happened or where that started from.
So I understand, of course, the IRA did not participate in some of the initiatives that the Ukrainian collaborators did initially. So obviously it's not to the same degree, this allegiance. But the point I'm trying to make is that, well, this is converging interest. Like it's the same as a lot of the former Soviet bloc Eastern European countries that wanted protection and wanted to be rid of any sort of like outside influence they were getting from Moscow. Having said that, I think ultimately it almost comes down to the same things that I've said before, which is America was on the right side of this conflict. Ukraine was invaded by a much larger irredentist regional power, Russia, unjustifiably. But America was on the right side, but it was for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that America's ambitions, I don't think any country's ambitions are moral or immoral. I think they...
No country's ambitions are moral or immoral? Then why the fuck do we care about Israel-Palestine then? Who cares?
They choose to push and pull in a direction that favors their overarching foreign policy goals. And I guess...
So then why did we just go through the whole thing saying that fucking Israel was evil and shit? Why not just say it's all amoral? None of it is good or bad.
The question I'm going to ask here is, because of being on the right side, but still ultimately for the wrong reasons, and you might disagree with me on that, and we can talk about that too. Do you feel like there were exit ramps where there could have been more leverage for Ukraine that could have been entertained more? And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, the Antalya 15-point program that was put forth after the initial pushback by Ukrainian forces and an abject failure of the fake Russian military operation, special military operation that failed to take over Kiev in a matter of weeks, as the initial assessment looked like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things in there. One is to answer your second question first. I see there, I'm not convinced that any of these agreements, the Istanbul Agreement or any of these, subsequent agreements, I think they were worth exploring. I think some of them were explored. Could they have been explored more? Yes. But again, at no point along the way have I seen any real evidence that Putin has ultimately changed his goals. I mean, he has stated them pretty clearly, whether or not it's the physical occupation and control of all of Ukraine's territory. It's, creating a Ukrainian government that is subservient to Moscow. I think the United States definitely
Yes, and he's not gonna. Hasan just doesn't. Jesus Christ.
could have leaned in on, wanting a ceasefire and an agreement. Could have leaned in on diplomacy at a few points along the way. Not necessarily because I think that would have achieved much, although that is always worth exploring, but because again, it would have put the onus back on Putin, just as Donald Trump has done in his own way. Just made clear, like, this is the man whose choices are driving this war. And now going back to what you said about, in his own.
I guess Matt Duss, is that a certain type of last name? Is as far as Hasan go when talking about Ukraine, white Western leftists and their views on Ukraine still stuck in 2022, throwing moral arguments still. I don't even know what this guy's position is.
Just made clear, like, this is the man whose choices are driving this war.
Oh, these guys believe in the CIA coup. Can you ask him about Euromaidan and American influence there? Because a lot of people think that the 2014 Euromaidan was like a CIA instigated color revolution, basically.
And now going back to what you said about being on the right side for the wrong reasons, I hear that. Listen, Joe Biden, I mean, even though I think he handled it fairly well, I understand he was doing this because he saw it serving the ends of American primacy. That is not a goal that I agree with. However, the way that I approached it as a progressive, who believes in people's rights to defend themselves, people's rights to independence,
Wait.
An institution that I am wholeheartedly in favor of may or may not have, in the same time frame, thought that they could have allegiances with someone who is an enemy to the British Empire. I won't say who, but both the Ukrainian groups and
defend themselves, people's rights to independence in international law. And the right of countries not to be invaded by their more powerful neighbors is a pretty foundational idea in international law. I mean, I saw a set of principles and values that were being upheld by a policy of the U.S. government, even if I didn't go all the way with the reasons why the U.S. government was doing that. And of course, the U.S. government is wildly hypocritical but, I mean, people accuse you of, or accuse, each other of whataboutism. They're like, well, we're not doing the right thing here. Why should we do the right thing over there? My approach is I just want to be consistent about these things. Government to uphold those values and those principles consistently.
Yeah. A couple questions for you. I have routinely stated since the invasion that this was also a massive blunder for Vladimir Putin as well, even though he has obviously been able to successfully gear the entirety of the Russian economy into a war economy and has been able to withstand a lot of the sanctions regime that was immediately implemented. Obviously, there's a lot of secondary markets that Russian energy can still...
Sorry.
The relationship between the United States of America and Russia, especially as it pertains to Ukraine, I think when he identifies Ukraine as a proxy, a Western proxy, Ukraine, but every other country, at the behest of America's foreign policy interest, which would be to undermine Russia's attempts of violating Ukrainian sovereignty and bringing Ukraine into its sphere of influence. Would you disagree with that assessment?
I would disagree that with treating Ukraine as just a proxy for the United States or for NATO. I think the Ukrainians themselves have wanted to.
I just want to say in the chat here
from Russia. I mean, this is a long-standing. Again, just speaking as a Ukrainian myself, this is something I was.
Yeah.
Independence in quotes. How is this guy not in jail yet? I don't even know what that's referring to.
I was raised with.
They wanted the coup. It is just a proxy to the State Department. Ukraine is stuck between empires.
As well, I mean, when Russians refer to Ukrainians as our little brothers, every Ukrainian knows what that actually means. It's not a compliment. But there has been many efforts going back even before the Soviet Union to achieve Ukrainian independence, with the understanding that there are going
independence, but also join NATO? Question mark. I like how they treat joining NATO and joining a Russian trade union, the nation state, is the same fucking thing. When Russia literally conquers you, takes your fucking shit hostage, like actually is capturing land from you, force you to join their shit, and if you don't, they're gonna like invade you and kill everybody, right? That's the same thing as like, hey, can we take a vote to join NATO, where sometimes we might help with things if they want us to, and everybody all has to agree, we all have to be on board with it. Like, oh my god, dude.
Going to be strong relations between Russia and Ukraine. A lot of Ukrainians are Russian speakers first. I mean, there's obviously family relationships. There's culturally a lot that's shared. But the stuff that USAID is doing, like supporting democracy efforts, supporting civil society efforts. I mean, yes, there's an element of that where the United States obviously is looking to achieve its interests. He wants to bring countries
Is that not the reason why Lenin created Ukraine at Hasanabi?
closer to it and farther away from its adversaries. I would not just interpret that as all of this was kind of like this coherent effort just to kind of weaken
USAID, Keck W. I can't, quote, democracy, end quote.
in Russia. I think the Ukrainians themselves have had and still have a strong desire to set up an independent, sovereign democracy.
Democracy efforts.
And again, that's why I've been supportive of efforts to help them defend themselves. I mean, I want this war to end. The Ukrainians want this war to end more than anyone. But I think referring to Ukraine as a proxy for the United States.
They gave up Crimea without much fight. Russia has Belarus to Ukraine's north, direct north. I don't blame them. Wanting to get into NATO, LOL. From Buddha Hands. Zelensky canceled elections. What democracy? Get this asshole away from Bernie Sanders at Hasanabi. Euromaidan was democratic.
The States, really deny.
QQ, is it true that not all anti-Zionists aren't Nazis, but all Nazis are anti-Zionists? If so, Hasan must have at least 2 Nazis in his chat, right? Probably.
The Ukrainians agency in a way that I just don't think is right.
We don't have a democracy. True.
I don't disagree with you on this, by the way. Of course, I think your assessment is completely correct. I see it as converging interests. Ukrainians have always, in their
He's not wrong. We also meddled in Ukraine, so our billionaires could make money, not just to weaken Russia. What the fuck? How much money was made meddling in Ukraine? What?
their national history, and you know this a lot better than I do, given your personal background, have always have always made their national.
Okay, never mind. Tim Pool was right all along. All right.
Project to be outside of the sphere of Russian influence, outside of the to have complete sovereignty. So that part I understand, and maybe along the way historically there have been some not so great attempts to do so by some Ukrainians, while the overwhelming majority of Ukrainians were busy, liberating the Cossack.
Ask him about the ICC reports about the SBU torture and abuse of the Eastern population during the Civil War. Oh my God! I don't know. I just clicked. Oh, Civil War is what they call it in the conflict that is in the two regions of the Donetsk region and the Donetsk region and Luhansk region. They call it a civil war because the mean propaganda point is just that there were just some basically innocent Ukrainians that were being oppressed by the Ukrainian government, so they started to fight back, and then Ukraine came and just started bombing and murdering all the civilians for no reason. In reality, that conflict has been funded by and instigated by and sometimes directly supported by, for a long time now, like Russian troops are just there like fighting, but they just like to pretend it was just a little bitty organic civil war.
Concentration camps. So,
yeah.
And it happens. I mean, the IRA also, an institution that I'm wholeheartedly in favor of, may or may not have, in the same time frame, thought that they could have allegiances with someone who is.
Okay, I see better why Bernie's foreign policy is so ass. You guys see what I'm talking about? I hope this is a good demonstration when I was saying that if you put 100 people who read theory in a room and you put Hasan at one point and then Bernie Sanders at another point, they're all saying Hasan is closer to a socialist than fucking Bernie Sanders AOC. These people fucking hate Bernie Sanders AOC. These people are not even, and these are their mask on moments. These are when they're streaming on Twitch and they're trying to be friendly and within the rules.
An enemy to the British Empire. I won't say who. But both the Ukrainian groups and the IRA had found themselves in the throes of a dark allegiance, let's say. So I understand, of course, the IRA did not participate in some of the initiatives that the Ukrainian collaborators did initially. So obviously it's not to the same degree, this allegiance. But the point I'm trying to make is that this is converging interest. It's the same as a lot of the former Soviet bloc Eastern European countries that wanted protection and wanted to be rid of any sort of outside influence they were getting from Moscow. Having said that, I think ultimately it almost comes down to the same things that I've said before, which is America was on the right side of this conflict. Ukraine was invaded by a much larger, irredentist regional power, Russia, unjustifiably. But America was on the right side, but it was for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense. Like, I don't think that America's ambitions, I don't think any country's ambitions are moral or immoral. I think they choose to push and pull in a direction that favors their overarching foreign policy goals. And I think a part of that. And I guess the question I'm going to ask here is, because of being on the right side, but still ultimately for the wrong reasons, and you might disagree with me on that, and we can talk about that too. Do you feel like there were exit ramps where
we just wanted to see what the future of drone warfare would look like?
There could have been more leverage for Ukraine that could have been entertained more. And I think you know exactly what I'm talking about, the Antalya 15-point program that was put forth after the initial pushback by Ukrainian forces and an abject failure of the fake Russian military operation,
We didn't get involved with World War II because we were shocked at what was going on and wanted to stop it. We have an interest, so I get it happening here too. We got involved in World War II because Japan fucking bombed us. What the fuck? In terms of actually starting to deploy troops and shit, but
military operation that failed to take over Kiev in a matter of weeks, as the initial assessment looked like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple things in there. One is to answer your second question first. I see there, I'm not convinced that any of these agreements, the Istanbul Agreement or any of these, subsequent agreements, I think they were worth exploring. I think some of them were explored. Could they have been explored more? Yes. But again, at no point along the way have I seen any real evidence that Putin has ultimately changed his goals.
Liberals cheer the Ukrainians to their deaths.
I mean, he has stated them pretty clearly, whether or not it's the physical occupation and control of all of Ukraine's territory. It's, creating a Ukrainian government that is subservient to Moscow. I think the United States definitely could have leaned in on, wanting a ceasefire and an agreement, could have leaned in on diplomacy at a few points along the way. Not necessarily because I think that would have achieved much, although that is always worth exploring, but because, again, it would.
Does Matt think the USA are a force for good? Here's this conspiracy as well. Boris Johnson went to Ukraine to tell them not to accept the peace agreement in May 2022. They were denied, not explored. That's just a Russian talking point. There's no evidence that this is true whatsoever.
An agreement, could have leaned in on diplomacy at a few points along the way, not necessarily because I think that would have achieved much, although that is always worth exploring, but because, again, it would have put the onus back on Putin, just as Donald Trump has done in his own way. Just made clear, this is the man whose choices are driving this war. And now, going back to what you said about, being on the right side for the wrong reasons, I hear that. Listen, Joe Biden, I mean, even though I think he handled it fairly well, I understand he was doing this because he saw it serving the ends of American primacy. That is not a goal that I agree with. However, the way that I approached it as a progressive, who believes in people's rights to defend themselves, people's rights to independence.
Also, to call Putin irredentist is silly and negates a real tactical fear of NATO/EU planting missiles a couple hundred kilometers away from Moscow. Can somebody tell me what the talking point is? I feel like I brought this up in one debate. Can somebody tell me what the talking point is, that Ukraine joining is so scary, but the Baltics already being in NATO is not scary? What is there a talking point for that, or what? I don't understand that. Or do these countries just not count as real countries? Do we just not care about them? They don't know where the Baltics are? Okay.
And in international law, and the right of countries not to be invaded by their more powerful neighbors is a pretty foundational idea in international law. I mean, I saw a set of principles and values that were being upheld.
Oh, who is you?
By a policy of the U.S. government, even if I didn't go all the way with the reasons why the U.S. government was doing that. And of course,
he's kind of all over the place here. Actually, his position sounds kind of similar to his Palestinian position a little bit, right? It seems like he's at least kind of consistent here, right? But
the U.S. government is wildly hypocritical in all of these things. We look no further than Gaza to show where all those same principles and rules and laws were and are being massively violated.
He says this, but denies the Nakba. Wait, this guy denied the Nakba? What?
But, I mean, people accuse you of, or accuse, each other of whataboutism. They're like, well, we're not doing the right thing here. Why should we do the right thing over there? My approach is...
I'm confused, but I will admit I was checked out during the beginning of this war. So, he is a commie who loves the USA? Sorry, but he is so annoying. Typical liberal delusion, wrapped with empty, polite tone and talk. Jesus. These guys hate this guy.
which is I just want to be consistent about these things. The Palestinians should have self-determination and freedom, and the right not to be destroyed, just as the
not the comparison.
Ukrainians should. And I want my government to uphold those values and those principles consistently.
Yeah. A couple questions for you. I have routinely stated.
Well, some people are saying, yep. Yes. All Western leftists have dogshit foreign policy. None of them advocate for removal of all military bases abroad. Progressives are just liberals who know more words.
Since the invasion, that
comparing Palestine to Ukraine, omega lol.
This was also a massive blunder for Vladimir Putin as well. Even though he has obviously been able to successfully gear the entirety of the Russian economy into a war economy and has been able to withstand a lot of the sanctions regime that was,
not gonna lie, kind of lost me there,
immediately implemented. Obviously, there's a lot of secondary markets that Russian energy can still reach Europe through, like India being one of
Russia's economy has been severely hampered. Don't believe all the memes.
Those one of the prime examples. And for me, even if I were to take the security concerns that Vladimir Putin might have had about bringing Ukraine, which is right
Dude just sounds like my upstairs shitlib neighbor, not gonna lie.
Next to, very close to Moscow, in proximity, as opposed to many of these other countries, like NATO encroachment. If that was a valid concern, a valid security concern.
U.S. economy is addicted to arms sales and oil. Until we fix that, U.S. foreign policy will never be good. Excuse me. The U.S. economy is addicted to tech. What the fuck are you talking about? We get most of our oil and shit from fucking Canada, and we can get it from South America and from the United States. Fuck OPEC. Sink them into the fucking ocean. Who do you think's gonna be hurt more? Who is getting fucked with the whole Russian oil embargo shit? It was fucking Europe, not the United States. Not nearly as much as fucking Germany and everybody else was. What the fuck are you talking about? My God.
I think the most successful way to avoid that would be to continue trade dominance and to continue engaging by way of energy trade like European allies and make yourself irreplaceable in a way that is not dissimilar to what China has been able to do. A less of an interest in direct intervention, but intervening in the affairs of other countries to create a security window for yourself by making sure that the bigger part.
Dude, is it just me or is this guy shit?
Partners involved are still completely they're beholden to the energy partnership or the trade that you have with Russia.
Yep.
I think not doing that and then militarily invading Ukraine was a major mistake that actually emboldened NATO, and that's
who blew up Nord 2, Matt.
the reason why you saw Finland and Sweden join NATO as well, especially because it was also a failure in terms of a military invasion as well. Which
I hate this. I hear you bullshit because he won't change any of his positions. This sucks so bad. Yeah, because he's too scared to push back on literally fucking anything.
Showed that Russia was wholly incapable of being a serious threat beyond.
Never met a foreign policy expert who wasn't a neoliberal at the end of the day. That's almost like it's almost like a sign that maybe that's so close to getting it. Fuck. What was the oh god, I feel like there was a tweet the other day where it was all my leftist friends who were supposedly really smart are somehow mysteriously failing their college course or failing to get hired by corporations.
On the obvious nuclear threat that I think, the explosion of Nord Stream as well, obviously. So there are numerous other failures here, but as it stands now, it feels like from what I have seen on the battle lines, the Russian position's hardening on eastern Ukraine, and they're making more territorial gains as well right now as we speak in the lead up to this summit. It feels like Russia sees this as having the upper hand, and I think that everything that I've read, as far as the problems that the Ukrainian defense has, means that there is this impossible problem that Ukraine has in terms of manpower. And I don't know if there's any reasonable way to make up for that shortage. It's not necessarily having the most, the best technology or the best defensive or offensive weapons, or even limiting Ukraine's targeting capabilities of hitting inside of Russian territory. Perhaps it could have been helpful early on, but it seems like at this stage, it doesn't matter. Do you agree with that assessment? Or do you feel like there's an alternative vision here that I'm not seeing?
Well, I think we're in a situation right now. First of all, going back, agreeing with you that this was initially a huge blunder and an embarrassment. And also, it's put Russia in a relationship with China, which I guess I won't call a vassal relationship, but a really subservient relationship with China.
Yeah.
That is really not something that I think Putin wanted. But he has shown the ability to reconstitute his military force to
Hasan does need to learn to ask questions and let his guests speak sometimes. The reason why Hasan asks big questions like this is because it gives him the opportunity to demonstrate his knowledge on the topic in a non-adversarial way. Because if he tries to go back and forth with this guy with actual disagreements, he might get blown the fuck out. But if he has like a really loaded big question, then it allows him to demonstrate some knowledge on the topic before his guest responds. And then no matter what his guest says, he can always go yes and, yes and, yes and.
To recruit, to strengthen over the past years with Chinese help.
Okay, I'm done with this. Wait, okay, one more meme. Sorry. What is this? Kind of funny that Destiny and Hasan flip this while the guy is consistent. Palestine equals Ukraine is the correct analogy. While Hasan denies this on the Ukraine side, Destiny denies it on the Palestine side. Well, they're not actually analogous. I'll make fun of people that will set these standards and then clearly violate them, but they're not analogous because the whole world knew what Ukraine's borders were in 91. That was a real country with real sovereignty that everybody knew and respected. And as far as I'm aware, Ukraine doesn't launch a whole bunch of terrorist attacks into Russia every single day. I don't think that the same can be said for the Gaza Strip, at least. That situation is a lot more weird. I spent 10 years building my body and lost it all in a few months. This is what life did to me. Before everything changed, I was a bodybuilder and trainer in Gaza. I weighed 108 kilograms, full of muscle, strength, and hope. I was well known in the fitness community and helped many athletes become champions. I loved inspiring people to take care of their bodies and mental health. I lived a beautiful life with my wife and young son. We were happy. Then, life took a turn I never expected. I became displaced from my home. We lost access to proper food, clean water, and medical care. The gym I trained in was destroyed. Over the past months, I have lost over 30 kilograms. I wonder how many months. Not because of a fitness goal, but because of hunger, malnutrition, and the constant psychological stress of just surviving. The muscle I spent more than 10 years building disappeared in just a few months. Every mirror now reflects not only a physical transformation, but the emotional and mental toll of being forced to start from zero. That's not even how any of this works. None of this is real. This is either an AI post with a fake person or it's just a retard guy trying to stir shit up online. Even if you do lose all your muscle, you're not starting from zero again. Also, in just a few months? I'm not sharing this for sympathy, but to show how life can sometimes break even the strongest people. How everything you worked for can vanish, not by choice, but by cruel. If you'd like to know more about the situation, feel free to visit my profile. Unless he was roiding, sorry. He could have been on gear, hardcore. In which case, maybe it can. I actually don't know. I guess how that works. Also, maybe the words are different in different languages, but like bodybuilder? No. Maybe lifter? Sure. Thumbs up. Did his muscles get blown off his body? He's pretty big in that first pick. I would say bodybuilder. Bodybuilders, I think generally, my understanding is if you're competing in bodybuilding, you're doing it for, bodybuilders are aesthetic. Powerlifters or whatever might compete in terms of like lifting like high numbers, but for bodybuilding, it's like a specific like body sculpting type thing. Like you want to have a certain aesthetic. Building muscle is a big part of that, so it's being very lean. There are going to be retards in chat that are saying off season. That's great. I'm glad that I have some people in my chat that are 45 IQ, but if you're an actual bodybuilder, why the fuck would you post pictures of yourself off season? That's the easiest low IQ shit I've ever seen in my chat. What a fucking retarded comment to make. Oh, it's just off season. Post on their pictures, motherfucker. Post some pics of you competing then. Does he have to be competitive? No, you don't have to be competitive, but you would just say, oh, I lift, or I'm like a power lifter, or I just lift and I enjoy lifting. But this is not, why would you say bodybuilding if you're not? Unless that means something, unless it's just like a fucking... Yeah, this guy's saying he trained champions and shit. I don't believe any of this. I think this is all bullshit. I think this whole story is bullshit. Fuck you. Find me other stuff to support it and I'll believe it. This is bullshit. He literally builds bodies. He's a cyborg. Based. Okay. He got 5K off his GoFundMe's when I checked yesterday. Bro, I retweeted a Bad Epanada thing today to fight with Hasan because I thought it was epic. I'm getting so many... I'm getting so many like tweets for like people who are supposedly from Gaza, like raising money for themselves or whatever. Hold on, fuck. I'm not getting triggered. I'm not gonna get one guide. Destiny, people are amateur bodybuilders, LeMayo. Okay, so I know if you've never like competed in anything in your entire fucking life or stepped outside of your house or done anything physical ever in your entire life, but amateur doesn't mean you did a thing once, or amateur doesn't mean that you do a thing every now and then. Amateur implies competing, okay? You have to be unironically, the smallest, tiniest, like non-competitive in any single thing in your fucking life to say, oh, they could just be an amateur and that's why he doesn't compete. Then you're not an amateur. It's just a hobby. It's a thing you do sometimes, or you might even do it frequently. But amateur implies competing. Jesus. Explain amateur porn then? Your mom makes amateur porn and she competes for most loads swallowed and she wins every single day. Okay.
Summit with Vladimir Putin, and one would think that if anybody would give him the benefit of the doubt, would give him fawning coverage, it would be his friends at Fox News. And yet...
I think you and me both, Brian, and everyone else in this room...
This is kind of a dumb point. It's not a dumb point. He's citing his expertise here. He's saying that he helped train athletes to become champions, right? This guy he's citing his own body, he's citing his own credentials, and he's citing some kind of a record here in terms of training people. And you're like, oh, who cares if he's got like the words on? No, that's fucking retarded. The guy's not a bodybuilder. He spends time in the gym. He lifts. That's fine. That's cool. I'm not saying he's small. I'm not saying he looks weak, but he's not a bodybuilder. So that's incorrect. And you can't lose that much mass in a few months. So he's lying about that too. No, fuck you. If you're going to cite to it, then of course I think you can be critical of it. If it was like some random guy and some random dude shows up and is like, hey guys, I'm a bodybuilder. What do you think about my, fucking lifts or my aesthetic or whatever? And somebody shows up like, oh, you're technically not bodybuilding, blah, blah. Then I was like, okay, yeah, that's cringe or whatever. But this guy's like citing some professional or quasi-professional background saying that he's trained athletes and champions, okay? And then the shit that he's posting is fucking retarded. Fuck you.
room was also surprised. We were told that we were going to have an opportunity to put questions to both leaders after a joint press conference in the event that the meeting went well enough that they could set the stage for a second meeting. And the President Trump said if that didn't happen, he was likely to call off the joint presser and just address.
Does he really look all that different than Canute? Where are my lifting people? Would you say this is like more than 15 or 20% body fat? What would you estimate this guy at? You're comparing this guy to Canute? 20 plus? Okay, hold on.
But remember, we're speaking about 100%, being 100%. He is 100%.
This is Canute in the middle? Like, seriously? This is off-season Canute. Also, again, this guy's the one citing his expertise. Why would you just post casual pictures of yourself then? Rare L, you can definitely lose that much weight in a few months. You're fucking retarded, but nice. ASDF1234. Good name. You got me. You one guide me. Okay. Okay. We're moving on to news, okay? Comparing onstage peak performance versus heavy bulk at Destiny.
Address the media solo and then send Putin home. Neither of those things happened. And what was really stunning to me as someone who's been in a lot of these press conferences is there were a few things that were very...
You know what? I was wrong. Because he has raised $14,000, so I stand corrected. Damn. Somebody needs to do a big retrospective on it. I'm so curious how many of these were scams at the end. There are so many of these fucking GoFundMes for like people who claim to live in Palestine or Gaza or whatever. But
very unusual. You had Putin come out and address the press first. I mean, we are on U.S. soil here, and that left the media scrambling to get their headsets in. Usually it is the leader of the country, the host country of a...
The caloric density of muscle is only 800 kilograms or 800 kilocalories per kilogram. You can lose almost a kilogram of muscle a day if you're completely starving, like no food. You almost got me there. That was a good one. That's a good one. You got me. That was close. 2 pounds of muscle a day? There are ways that you can lose 2 pounds of muscle a day. That's called getting shot and your muscle gets blown off, or somebody slices off half your fucking quad or your fucking ass muscle. What? Stop trolling me. Stop. I'm not getting one guide anymore. Stop. We're watching this lady talk about our president.
A summit that speaks first and addresses the room in their language. But Putin started right off in Russian, and we all had to get our headsets on and listen to him rattle off this diatribe about the history of the U.S.-Russia relationship.
He lost weight because of that Gaza Strip fent? Shut the fuck up. Stop trolling me!
Some allusions to something that we didn't get many details on, but also, without knowing the full background of it, there was something that he said that was a little bit alarming, I thought.
Is he wearing headphones? What is this? What is happening here? Is this a real balding pattern where the front part, is this a body double? What's going on here? Maybe it's just the pixelated. I don't know.
That
he got a fresh cut. That's a fresh lineup.
seems like some of the things that he has done in the past, setting up false flags and that kind of thing, saying that we hope that Ukraine doesn't do anything to sabotage the progress that we made today, knowing full well that Ukraine has agreed to a ceasefire unconditionally for the last several months, and it has been Russia that has not agreed to a ceasefire. That was President Trump's main objective today. And when we did hear from the president, he said, we didn't get there, but we think that we can.
If you eat no food, you can lose 1.5 to 5 pounds of weight a day, depending on what you're doing. I'm going to do... what's that diet? What's the diet where you lose 35 pounds of weight in a week? That doesn't involve you starting at 1,000 pounds of weight? Stop baiting me. Why? I don't know why I'm getting baited. Okay.
So a lot of questions remaining for the president, Trump, not just about what was discussed in that room and what might be happening now, but also how that all happened back there. It was just very unusual, atypical, and I think we're all awaiting, the readout because the way that it felt in the room was not good. It did not seem like things went well, and it seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got right into what he wanted to say, and got his photo next to the president and then left.
It seemed like Putin came in and steamrolled, got his photo with Trump, and left. Look, Fox can say whatever it wants, but I, for one, refuse to believe that the guy who owns Trump University, Trump Steaks.
That's not necessarily true. Older people can lose muscle mass very fast. See it all the time just during the prolonged hospital admissions, especially when you're catabolic from illness. Oh, that is true. Because that guy looked like he was a 70-year-old, bedridden, hospitalized old man with cancer. True. Thank you.
Trump Vodka, Trump Airlines, Trump Taj Mahal, Tour de Trump, and Trump the Game wouldn't be able to negotiate a deal with... What's that? All of them? Jesus Christ. So Trump pulled out all the stops for his big summit and ended up with no ceasefire, no second meeting, and no deal.
What? I'm sorry. Say that again?
And ended up with no ceasefire, no second meeting, and no deal. I'm sorry, but anyone who didn't think Trump would get absolutely rolled here is either a fool or has spent so much time up Trump's ass that they haven't gotten enough oxygen to their brains. Of fucking course, Trump got played. What incentive is there for Vladimir Putin to surrender anything when he already knows that he owns Donald Trump? The guy is so desperate for his validation and affection that he will, and has, bent over backwards to give him exactly what he wants at every turn. And in return, well, Trump rolled out the red carpet for a murderous dictator. And when I say red carpet, I'm not even being facetious.
Vitaly, before and after detainment in the Philippines, after just 3 months. Okay, for online people, first of all, I'll ignore the fact that it's like different lighting and stuff, but like he still has some his arms here. But also, if they're an online influencer, there are two types of influencers online that do like that want to look good. There are people that do gear, and then there are people that lie about doing gear. Okay, so everybody is on some bullshit. They might not be on that good trend dip or drip or whatever. They might be on the TRT, where they go to their friendly TRT provider and they're like 4 times boosted over their last rate or whatever, but they're all on some bullshit. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how fast you lose muscle if you go from on to off. Like that might be accelerated. I'm not sure. Vitaly admits that he's steroid upped. Oh, there you go.
Yep, nothing like pulling out all the stops for the guy who humiliates you on your own turf. But when Trump fails, there's always his safety net to make sure that he doesn't fall too far.
Look, everything came up Trump in the U.S. today. This was his meeting on U.S. soil with U.S. bombers ahead. Mm-hmm. Look at the step and repeat behind them. It says pursuing peace. Do you think Vladimir Putin wanted to stand in front of a banner on U.S. soil?
That was our big own, was the fact that we got him to stand in front of the banner.
A foot shorter than the U.S. president in front of words that say pursuing peace. That's the goal here.
Wow.
But that's President Trump's goal.
Yeah, and when we get details, I'll know. I can't weigh in until I find out what exactly they agreed on, but they both agreed to something. I just was texting back and forth with Sean Hannity, who just sat down with the president, and he said the president noted that he came out and said there wouldn't have been a war if he was president, and that's what part of Vladimir Putin said at the end of his written remarks. And he also said, in a scale of 1 to 10, I give today a 10.
Wow,
so that's
a
the
10.
President grading what he thought of the meeting.
A 10 out of 10. Look,
For
I know that the
nothing.
right loves railing against participation trophies, but boy do they love handing them out, especially to their very special president whose feelings are extra sensitive. I mean, honestly, how do you rate this a 10 with no ceasefire, no second meeting, no deal, unless your only job is getting on your knees to show your boss how loyal you can be? Okay, yeah, that makes total sense. And for those who say, you're being too hard on Trump, Putin's a tough guy and this is what negotiating really looks like, I'm going to put 2 photos on the screen. I want you to tell me which one looks like they're better positioned to negotiate on behalf of the United States.
Jesus, he's a killer. Look at him over here. Whew.
Here's a hint. It ain't the guy who looks like he just shit his pants. You might be asking too, why wasn't Zelensky at this meeting? Wouldn't it have made sense for a summit about a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine to actually include Ukraine? And the answer was that Donald Trump wanted to do it all by himself. He wanted all the attention and all the credit. But now that he failed, watch him move the goalposts.
We were together almost 3 hours, and it was very extensive, and we agreed on a lot of points. I mean, a lot of points were agreed on, but there's not that much. There's, one or two pretty significant items, but I think they can be reached. Now it's really up to President Zelensky to get it done. And I would also say the European nations, they have to get involved a little bit, but it's up to President Zelensky.
Look at that. Suddenly he deigns to allow the Ukrainian president to attend a meeting regarding Ukraine's freedom. How kind of him. Of course, the reason is that Donald Trump has come to accept the reality that he is wholly incapable of negotiating this deal, which is why the terms are changing in real time. In fact, he went so far as to offer advice to Zelensky.
What would your advice, based on today, when you talk to Vladimir Zelensky, what's your advice to...
Make a deal.
Make the deal.
Gotta make a deal, yeah. Look, Russia's a very big power.
Yeah, I
Wow.
mean, look, if I was Zelensky, I would definitely take Donald Trump's advice. After all, why wouldn't I listen to the guy who just got humiliated on the global stage? Also, note how Donald Trump says that Russia's a great power. Right, the country that was supposed to take Kyiv in 3 days has been fighting for 3.5 years.
Wait, hold on. I'm getting one guy so hard by this. Is there proof that the guy posting here is the same guy from the Instagram? Because somebody linked me his Instagram. If this guy wanted to post about this shit, I feel like he had way, way, way better pictures to choose from. Why the fuck would he not post this stuff, right? I feel like these look way better. At least if you're trying to sell yourself as like a bodybuilder that's training people or whatever. I don't understand why he would go with the quasi dad bod used to lift in college pic. I don't know why. I bet that this account, I bet this guy, I bet he's not even the dude. I bet that this dude is this guy scamming him. This guy here, 100%. 100%. 100%. By 100%, I mean 80%. Dad bod? Yeah, this is what girls call dad bod now, okay? Get with the times, okay? Get with the trends, all right? Also, I don't care how long this account's been posting, no amount of evidence will change my mind on this. Even if this account was made before October 7th, I will never change my position on this, no matter what evidence you show me. So get fucked.
But Trump needs to frame Russia as formidable because that's the only way he doesn't look like a complete failure amid his embarrassment at the hands of Vladimir Putin. This isn't about reality, it is about protecting Trump's ego, per usual. The reality is that when even the network that paid $787 million for lying on Trump's behalf can't spin this train wreck as a win, it's pretty clear that the summit was a failure and that Mr. Art of the Deal can't actually make one.
True.